Hello, my name is James Mazzullo, and I'm the Senior Communications Associate with Infosys Foundation USA. And today we'll be speaking with Parrice Urbina and John Samuel, CEO and co-founder of Abler 360, an organization whose mission is digital accessibility and inclusion for all. This podcast will be in commemoration of National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which is the month of October. Both Paris and John are visually impaired, so today we'll be discussing their personal journeys, as well as Paris's experience with the InStep internship program, which she did this summer. So I'd like to start off the podcast by John asking you if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your personal journey and a little bit about Abler 360 as an organization.
And it's an honor to be here today and talking about National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So my story actually starts when I was born and raised in Cary, North Carolina. My folks had moved from India in the 60s to go to college, and then they settled down in North Carolina. And as a young person, I started noticing some changes in my eyesight, but didn't know what was going on. And so when I went off to college, I started noticing some real changes. I was walking into everything and my shins were always cut up. And I realized there's something seriously off. And I got tested and I was diagnosed with a degenerating eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. And I was told I was going blind. And as a young person, I didn't take the news very well. And my actions led to me failing out of college. And so I moved back home to North Carolina and moved in with my high school buddies who were going to NC State University. But I was ashamed and embarrassed to tell them that I had failed out and that I was going blind. But I found this loophole at NC State that I could take a couple classes every semester. But I was scared to tell them that I was like I had failed out and that I was going blind. So I kept it all a secret. And it was really challenging to keep this secret. Now, not only from the school, but from my friends and my family. And eventually I did graduate and I knew I had to get out of North Carolina. And I decided to move out to Bangalore, India, where I started working for an organization called Saskin. And when I was at Saskin, culture was really challenging for me. I was again not disclosing my disability, but I realized, I wanted to get back home to the U.S. after a couple years, and I decided to move to New York City. And in New York, I started to, look at my friends around me, and they were moving into, their law firms and investment banking and going to grad school. And I was working for the city of New York, living paycheck to paycheck, and I didn't think I had that same type of career trajectory as them. And I reconnected with somebody named Steve Clemens, who I'd crossed paths with in Bangalore. And he was on the board of directors of a cell phone tower manufacturing company. And he wanted to start a company in Cameroon. And when I heard about this, I jumped at it. I said, send me out there. I can do this. And Steve knew I had some sort of eye condition, but didn't know the extent of my vision loss. And he he decided to take a chance on me because no one else really wanted to move out to Cameroon. And but when the investors of the company found out that I couldn't see, they decided that they didn't want to take a chance on me. And I pleaded with them. I said, just give me a chance. And they said, okay. And after after some time, they allowed me to come out there, and I took a $20,000 investment and left Manhattan for Douala, Cameroon, and I had to start a company from scratch. And I built a team around me, and we had immediate success. And that $20,000 turned into $12 million in revenue, 2.4 million in profit, and we spread that company across Africa. But after that professional success in Africa, I decided I want to come back home to the US to do my MBA. And again, I had been keeping my vision loss a secret this whole time. And when I got to grad school, I found myself at an orientation event where they had name cards where we were supposed to go sit, and I couldn't see my name. So I turned to the person next to me for help. And it happened to be the dean of the business school. And she had no idea that I couldn't see because I never disclosed it. I kept it a secret. And she could empathize with me because she actually had a child with a disability, and she encouraged me to be open about my vision loss. And that allowed me to start talking about my vision, and it was really helped me out. And I say that was the first time I could open up my heart, and I met my wife in the program. But even though I was now open about my vision loss in my personal life, I thought professionally companies would see it as a liability. And so I kept it a secret. I continued to. And that, I I eventually landed with another company, but it was a hard road. After my grad school, so many people, my classmates were getting jobs with great companies like Infosys, but I wasn't. And I finally got a job. But after a few years, that company folded and I was out of a job again. You know, and this time I now had a wife, a baby, and the stress of everything caused my sight to go even faster. And so that that kind of experience, I thought my career was over because I could no longer see the computer screen. And that's when I heard about this software that was developed at SAS, the data science company. And they had designed this software to help people who are blind in low vision visualize graphs and charts using sounds. And I thought it was really cool. But the cool thing about it was designed by a guy named Ed Summers who had the same eye condition as me and lived in Cary, North Carolina, my hometown, and the same place I didn't think people who were blind could live. And so I had never met another blind person up until that point. And so I jumped at the chance to go meet Ed. And after meeting Ed, he introduced me to the world of accessibility. And so that experience, showed me that my career wasn't over and I learned about accessibility. And he introduced me to an organization called LCI, which happens to be the largest employer of people who are blind in the country. And they're a manufacturing company, but they wanted to create a new business that would create upper mobility for people who are blind in tech. And that's what led to the formation of Abler. So it's a long story, but I think it's important to know that personal story and how it drove us to launch Abler.
Definitely, John. Thank you for that background. It's huge support. Thank you. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about Abler 360, your mission, and how you guys go about it?
Yeah, for sure. And so at Abler, we have a really simple mission. It's to remove the barriers for people with disabilities in all aspects of life. And employment is a big piece of that. And when we think about the barriers, even in my own personal life, there's challenges that I was facing as I was looking for jobs. There's a few things that we had to address. First, we had to eliminate the digital divide, which we're doing through our digital accessibility practice. This is where we're helping to make sure that all digital content can be accessed by people who use assistive technology and who have various disabilities. And then we realized we had to change the mindset of people in organization. So we launched a disability inclusion training where we're helping to train organizations to be more inclusive and understand the why it's important to including people with disabilities in your workforce. And then finally, we needed to create pathways for employment. So we launched a workforce development program. And that workforce development program actually has multiple tracks now. We have an adult program where we're training folks to become digital accessibility analysts. And most recently, we just launched a high school program to expose students who are blind to the future of work. And so we have a lot of different lines of business, but when you think about it, all of those tracks that we do are really geared towards that one mission of removing barriers for people with disabilities.
Great, thank you. And I'll go into this a little more with Parrice too. But John, I was wondering if you could speak just briefly on the need for this accessibility online, like the amount of websites and areas online that aren't accessible for people with disabilities. If you could just share a little glimpse into the audience at home who may not know just how overwhelming it is for someone with disabilities to go online and not really met with the standards they need to really practice safely.
Yeah, for sure. When we start to think about how much we're reliant on digital content, websites for education, for work, to get, shop, everything we do, we are touching tech and, digital content. And so as somebody who's a screen reader user or using another type of assistive technology, if we can't actually functionally use a website or actually, do the call to action, it becomes very difficult. And so as a student, it was hard for me to actually access a lot of my, classwork or video content or things of that nature because buttons just weren't accessible or links weren't labeled properly. And so I didn't have that same experience. And so this is a case that you're talking about students, you're talking about employees. So, and I think there's a stat out there, it's like 96% of all digital content has some sort of accessibility barriers. So when we think about that, it's really important that we eliminate that digital divide because otherwise we're going to leave a lot of people behind. And so by making sure that digital content is accessible, it's the right thing to do, but now there's also a compliance component to it. So, you can do the right thing, you can be compliant, and you can create a new business opportunity for a whole new group of people who've been overlooked.
Definitely, thank you. I think the insight is very valuable. And lastly, John, before we get into Paris, can I just ask how you met the Infosys Foundation USA and how that relationship
Hmm.
started?
Yeah, for sure. So I've known Infosys for several years. As I mentioned, my dad actually used to work for an organization called Nortel Networks, and he was there for the early days of Infosys. And so I grew up actually knowing about Infosys, even as a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid. But when I was actually just probably last year, I had heard about the Infosys Springboard with the mission of getting 10 million people access to this amazing training. I thought that it would be amazing if we can actually have 20% of that training done by people with disabilities. That'd be 2 million people. Because that's how many people, 20% of the population identify with having a disability. So, when I heard about this amazing opportunity with Springboard, I was like, I got to learn more about this. I reached out, I got connected with Victor, who was leading that effort, and he introduced me to the foundation. And as we got to talk to Kate and others on the foundation team, we realized that there was a lot of synergy. We wanted to be able to take that Springboard training and bring it to our candidates in our workforce development program because I don't want to recreate the wheel in terms of content. And if there's this amazing content with an amazing organization behind it, it was just a perfect marriage for me. And the foundation has just been an amazing partner with us, and I can't be more grateful for everything they've done so far and what we're going to do together in the future.
Thank you, John. And we're also excited for the collaboration between Abler and Infosys Foundation USA. I just wanted to touch upon a point you mentioned earlier when you referred to the online learning, digital learning platform, Infosys Springboard USA. Springboard is one of the foundation's initiatives. It's in furtherance of Infosys's ESG vision of providing 10 million people with free digital skills by the year 2030. In support of that, we asked Parrice to come on and review the website and ask if it met WCAG compliance, which means if it's accessible for those who have a screen reader. So, Parrice, I'd like to move on to you now and just ask if you wouldn't mind sharing about your personal journey and how your in-step experience went with the foundation and reviewing Springboard.
So, as far as my experience goes, I sort of, it's like in a way how John had experienced, in that most of my family, if not all of my family, are right, like just what we call sighted. There's other
Mhm.
than like just wearing glasses, there's no visual impairment in my family. I used to wear glasses. When I was younger, back in the day, certain glasses we got wasn't exactly fashionable. So I didn't really want to wear my glasses, but I had no choice. But when I turned 15, I talked my aunt into letting me get contacts, and it was awesome. Not having to wear the glasses and wearing contacts, except 15-year-olds are not very responsible all the time. So I was a little lazy. I put my contacts in. I did what I was supposed to do, but I didn't always take them out. And I did clean them when I was supposed to, but that didn't always happen. So one day I remember I woke up, and when I woke up, I noticed in my right eye there was like a white patch. And I really didn't know what it was, but at 15, you see something like that and you're like, huh, that's different. But, it popped up suddenly. You think it's going to go away just as suddenly. So I didn't really say anything. I didn't think much of it. I kind of just tried to ignore it. It wasn't taking over like my whole vision. It just was literally like just a point that I saw. It was big enough for me to notice, but not big enough to obstruct anything vital. So I went along my business, did what I was supposed to do. Years passed. I was 18 and I wanted to go to college, and I applied and I went to college. And honestly, I wanted to do biology. I wanted to be a surgeon because I enjoy like that kind of stuff. I enjoy the idea of science and how anatomy and people's bodies work. So I wanted to be in that field where I was helping on that level. Well, I was in school and one of my classes was zoology, I believe. And the great thing about that class is it was a self-taught class where you had to go in your class, you had slides and you had all kinds of things. And I started realizing that I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing in the slides were in the slides or in my eyes, because I at that point had started having floaters, which I'm not sure if anybody knows what those are, but floaters are little black spots, little light spots, little things, squiggly lines that kind of float around in your vision, and they're constantly there. But I wasn't sure what they were, whether it was my slides in the microscope, like little cells, or whether it was the floaters. So I went to the doctor because it has started becoming a problem. And um, the doctor I went to, he looked in my eye and he was like, huh. So he left and he came back. When he came back, he had a student with him. And I was like, well, that's different. And he had the student look in my eyes and he asked me if I'd minded if, he had other people come in. Well, he left and he came back with a group of people. And I was like, well, this can't be good. So they told me that I had a cataract and that it was covering my eyes, and that's what was going on. So that started my I guess journey of visual impairment. And it started getting worse, but I had a surgery, and the surgery helped where it took away, they removed the cataract and helped me be able to see a lot more. And it was great, except um, and that's also, like I said, I had never met a blind person, not in person. I've seen people on TV, but in my, you know, real life, I had never met one until then. And I had gotten introduced to the rehab center. I learned how to use Zoom text. I learned how to use a keyboard. I learned different things and how to, you know, basically do daily tasks and stuff with vision loss, because I had not learned that before. I hadn't known about that. I went through regular school, high school, no problem. And so I also started working for LCI, funnily enough, and I worked for them for a while. Um, and then I had started having children, and I had in 2010, my doctor said, well, we can do a corneal transplant. I had already had one on my right eye. It lasted about a couple of months, and then my sight went back to the same way. So then when they said, okay, well, we can do it on your left eye, which was my more functional eye, I was like, well, okay. And it did give me a lot more sight, but what had ended up happening is I had a retinal detachment that caused all the sight in my left eye to go, and it shut down. And so then I had to start revamping things, because now I'm going from at least having some sight, where I was about maybe 2400 or something, to having no sight. So I had to learn JAWS, and I had to learn how to use other screen readers, and do things a little different than I was already used to. And it was really frustrating because, and it was a little depressing, because I was used to being able to see what I was able to see. I wasn't able to see my children anymore, which was sad. And then I was like, I didn't know what my purpose was. I didn't know what to do. I would help other people with screen readers and stuff, because I knew it, but I didn't know what to do. And I remember talking to my caseworker, because she was like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? What have you decided to do? Because I had tried school, and that was really difficult trying to do that without sight, because um funnily, I'm a visual learner. So being a visual learner and then losing your sight is kind of hard. So I told her I don't really know. And I was just about to close my case, and I just happened to mention to her that I really want to be of help. I want to be able to help. I want to be able to teach people how to use accessible technology. I want to learn more and be a part of making, content and everything accessible. And she said, well, I just heard about a program, and it just started. They're going to be starting it next month, and we have to hurry if you want to get involved. And it was with Abler, with their Internet Accessibility Analyst program. And I was like, well, you know what? Okay, fine. I'll try it. I don't have anything going on. And it was like one of those kind of light in the tunnel, hoping that this would lead me to a purpose, to something that made me more than who I was. And then I met Shannon and I did um my assessment, and I made John and met John and I met Liv, and I was like, okay, this is something. And it was interesting because we were the first, so it was fun, it was interesting, it pushed me. I got my CPAC, I got my trusted tester, and I just, I did my internship with them and I learned more and more. And then they told me last year, they were like, well, look, we just linked up with this company called Infosys, and they have an internship. And they were like, well, they were looking for a few candidates that were promising. And I was like, okay, well, look, I'm not doing anything. Sign me up. So then I got into Infosys, and it was really cool meeting everybody, dealing with all of the different platforms, helping to bring them up to compliance because yes, there were some things and yeah, like John said, most websites don't have they have some kind of accessibility issue. Almost every website, like even government websites, which should be completely compliant since they are the ones who initialized everything, they are always going to be something. So it was really cool to be able to help to like show and like give them information so that it could make their websites compliant and accessible because it is really hard when you want to do things and you can't, and it's only because it's not fully accessible. It can be difficult. And since Emphasis, I have also well, during as well. I've also um, worked with art guilds and helping to make the art galleries accessible. We've had workshops. I just had a recent one that was like clay art. Before my sight loss, I was very heavily into art. And it was really hard to lose that. But now I've discovered clay and other hands-on art that I can still do. So I feel like Abler has helped me like push myself more into accessibility and to be able to help other people to show them different places and things that we can do that uh doesn't matter if we can see or not.
Great, thank you, Parisse. That was wonderful.
Hmm.
Question, if you wouldn't mind just briefly further elaborating on your time with the InStep program and the foundation, would you mind just briefly going over how you supported the Springboard platform? And if you,
Yes.
I think it would be helpful, Paris, if you, because you mentioned JAWS earlier before, if you could just give some
Hmm.
context as to the names of these screen readers or the popular, just so our audience has some further context as to how you guys go about using the screen readers. I think
Yes.
yeah, that overall information I think would be very helpful.
So JAWS stands for Job Access with Speech. There's also NVDA, which for the life of me right now, I can't think of what it means, but basically, and then there's VoiceOver and there's TalkBack. But VoiceOver and TalkBack are smartphone screen readers. Basically, what these technologies do is they allow someone who is visually impaired to be able to use a computer or a phone by reading what's on the screen. But the thing is, the software has to be made compatible with the website. So it can read what's on a screen, but if the information is not programmatically formatted so that the software can pick it up, then you have the issues that John was saying where you have a link that doesn't tell you what the link is, or a button that just says button, which to other people would be like, oh, well, it's a button. Isn't it supposed to say button? Well, the thing about buttons is some buttons will make like, if you're on a media player, it's play button, fast forward button, rewind button, mute button, all that. But if every button says button, then how are you to know what button does what? So it's very important for these buttons to be labeled, just like links are important to be labeled because on any random web page, there could be anywhere from one link to over 100 links. So if there are 100 links and they all say the same thing, then there's no way for a screen reader to discern where this link takes you. Now, for a person who is sighted, If there's a link and it's in a picture, then you know where this is going to take you because you can see the picture. But unfortunately, for someone who is visually impaired, we're not able to see this picture. So if we bring up a list of link, which is a function that can be done, all we'll get is link, 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 link. There could be 30 links that are labeled links. There could be 10 links that are labeled links. But in any case, none of it's helpful to us because we don't know what that link goes to unless we go through each link one at a time to each page, which is time consuming. Basically, what JAWS is a way to be able to be efficient. Just like any other person who's on a computer, you want to be able to do whatever you're doing as quickly as possible without making as many mistakes. That's pretty much what we want. We want to be able to go as fast as possible without making a lot of mistakes or going to a lot of places that we didn't mean to go to. So that's why it's really important for things to be labeled correctly. Also, it's important for there to be headings. A lot of people tend to use headings as as a stylistic, like because they're big, you want to use it because it's great and it brings your eye. But the unfortunate part about that is that someone who's using a screen reader uses a heading to basically tell them what's in the part below them. So if a heading is used wrong, it basically slows a person down who is using a screen reader. So it's just important to think about those things so that it can be useful for those of us who need it. As far as Infosys, I helped with their Springboard and with Pathfinders and with the foundation page by basically documenting anything that I found that was an accessibility issue, whether it was too many heading level ones, which there should be one, or it was buttons that weren't labeled correctly, or it was slideshows that were which slideshows are very difficult. For whatever reason, slideshows don't always work well with screen readers. And if they're not correctly formatted, you have the issue with not knowing what's on that slide or not going through that slide correctly. So I helped with just basically keeping track of everything that I found so that they were able to correct the issues that were found and bring their websites or your websites back up to compliance with WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines.
Great, thank you, Parrice. And I know how much of an undertaking it was, how the overhaul was to make the website compliant.
Mhm,
I think that just goes to show how much each of these websites just don't even understand the lengths they have to go to become more compliant and
mhm,
inclusive of users who have a screen reader.
mhm.
So given that
Yeah.
depth of everything, John, my next question for you, and Parrice, I'll ask you the same, is if you guys could share some advice on how Infotians or people every day can be more inclusive in their workspace, creating a more inclusive work environment and in their day-to-day life. You guys have any advice?
Mhm,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd say you have to have grace. We have to give each other grace because you're right. I mean, I think until Paris went in and started to, use it and provide feedback, it's hard. I don't think any developer or designer goes in intentionally saying, I want to make this inaccessible. And we just don't know what we don't know. And so I think that's one of the important things of including people like Priest and myself, who are native screen reader users and assistive technology users, to be part of the team and be able to provide that feedback, right? So I think it's important that we include people with various abilities on the team and and create an environment where people feel safe to provide candid feedback about that experience. And so, I also think there's something we need to be thinking about. It's not just about compliance, but we need to be thinking about functional accessibility. Can an
mhm,
actual person using assistive technology use this? So I think that's a really important piece. It's one thing to be accessible, I mean, compliant, but it's another thing to be actually, can you actually use it in the way that it's intended to do? So, I'd go back to saying we need to give grace for each other. We need to make sure that we create an environment where we make an inclusive environment where people with assistive technology is a part of the design process, and development team, and then also providing, an outlet for people to provide actual feedback. And I think if we can do those three things, it's a good start.
Yeah, and I agree with John. It's important to understand a different point of view, so to speak. Just like he said, it's easy to say, well, this should be the way it should be, but like unfortunately, if you're sighted, you're not going to experience what we experience. That's why it's extremely important. And I know that there are sighted people who are testers who use a screen reader. But the thing about that is that yes, you will do the surface layer stuff, but there's so many things that someone who is a native screen reader use will do or know how to do or even attempt before someone who's sighted who knows of a screen reader will do. Because it's just like it's just like if you are learning how to speak another language. Yes, you know how to communicate, but you won't know the nuances or the little sayings that are said by people who have learned it or who are, who learn it from birth or whatever. So it's you have to look at it that way. A screen reader is a language, and there are some sighted people who speak the language, but
Mhm.
they're not going to speak it as fluently as someone who's visually impaired. So it's very imperative. I'm a firm believer that every accessibility team should have someone who's uses it as a necessity and not just to help out because there's going to just be everything that can be missed simply because it's not really needed. It's just being used to kind of give a once over. And it is also important to try and implement a lot of things from the development stage because a lot of places will say, and I've seen this in many places, that yeah, we can go in and we can make it accessible. But if you don't do it from a development stage, it's going to be even harder to do it at a later stage than it would be if you build it in it. That's one of the reasons why a company like Apple has a lot more success because their voiceover is it's ingrained. It's not an afterthought. So everything that is built in is already built in to work with that software. That's how we have to kind of do is try to figure out a way to make it where it's already there, like it's an actual building block. It isn't like, okay, we're going to put the topper on it. So, but again, it goes back to just understanding that everyone isn't going to understand. And the only way to help them understand is just to express why it's important and to be open-minded, and say, okay, this is not someone attacking me and my empathy, but just trying to let me see from another point of view how or why it's important.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and Priest, I'm sure when you were actually doing some testing, I'm sure there was all those aha moments. Because when they see the issue, they're like, when they see you going through with that screen reader, I'm sure they're like, oh, I
hmm
get it now. I get it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. So like when I did my final presentation, I chose to do it by giving a demonstration of a screen reader because like you
Mhm.
said, it's easy for me to tell you why this is
Yep.
important, but I felt the need to show because showing gives you a different vantage point, so to speak, because you're seeing, okay, this is what they do. Because it's always interesting to me when someone tries to tell you something and they're like, okay, the left side of the screen. But a lot of people don't understand that screen readers don't have a left and right side of a screen. It's got a tab order. It goes in that tab order. So if you don't make it where it makes sense, then we could be all over the page and you're like, why are you all the way down there? And I'm like, I'm
Mm.
just following the screen reader. I don't have any control over where the tab order goes. This is why it's important to make sure that it's functioning in a way that makes sense, for the screen readers.
Definitely. And to build off a little bit, Paris, about what you said earlier, John, I think a good final note to leave off on would be to ask you to further elaborate on a message to businesses, companies starting websites. Why is it important to prioritize making sure that inclusivity is a priority right when you're, as Paris said, building out these websites beforehand? Just if you could speak and a message to companies to just show the importance of that.
Yeah, for sure. When we think about, as Priest mentioned, it's when you build it with accessibility in mind in the beginning, it's going to be a much easier implementation than later on. because it's rather than adding a bolt on, you build it in the foundation. It's going to be less expensive. You're going to have a better experience for everyone. And we often say that accessibility is necessary for a few, but useful for all. And so when you make a product accessible for one group of people, people are going to benefit from it. And when you have a better experience, a user experience for all people, it's going to drive more revenue, more business for that experience. So there's a business case for it, and there's also just the right thing to do. And not to mention risk compliance, but I'd rather focus on the business case and the right thing to do.
John, that brings up a good, I remember there was a quote, it's that that we are all temporarily abled, and that eventually our eyes will go, our ears will go, and these things will eventually all become important for everyone.
For sure,
So
we're the most inclusive group of people. We'll take you anytime, right? You can join our group of people, young, old, we'll take you anytime in life, right? You can
Yeah.
join the disability community and we will welcome you with open arms and assistive technology ready to go. But you're
Yeah.
right. And when we talk about, right now we're going through the silver tsunami where I think every single day in the United States, 10,000 people are turning 65 or older. And
Mm.
at the age of 65 and older, every year you're going to be more likely to adopt a disability. So not only, are we talking about, a lot of people, it's, people who, 20% of the population identify with a disability, and this number is only going to continue to grow.
Hmm.
great point.
Yeah. Also, a lot of people don't understand that disabilities are not always something that people are born with. Most of the people that I know who are visually impaired, it did not happen from genetics. It was either an
Mhm.
accident or an illness or even stress. Like I've met multiple people who had lost their sight due to stress alone. So, people have this misconception that, oh, my genetics are fine or nothing's going to happen. But most disabled people are not disabled because of genetics.
Great point. All right, well, I think we're coming up on time. Thank you both. John, can I ask if you have any departing words or any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate the Infosys Foundation for being intentional about, really taking this on. I think it was said, there's continuous improvement. And I think the Infosys Foundation, with the mission of being able to provide, education and support youth across the United States, and making sure that it's accessible is just a great step. And we're so grateful for your leadership and partnership. And we're so excited to see what's going to happen. And thank you for highlighting National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And, it truly means a lot.
Thank you. And Parrice, the same for you. Any final thoughts?
I really appreciated the opportunity I got from Emphasis. You all are a great bunch of people. I met a lot of awesome people. I even still kind of join meetings with Scott and Brennan and them. So I feel like it opened my eyes to a lot of like things that are out there, how found the foundation work, how nonprofits work. It's amazing, especially when you have a great group of people who work well together. So it was a really good experience. And I hope that I, continue to be able to be a part of your Infosys family.
Great. Well, thank you both for that in-depth insight. I know it's incredibly valuable for myself, and I know it'd be incredibly valuable for the audience, as your perspectives are not one we hear much from. So it is one that we should hear much more from. And I'm glad we can put a microphone in front of you guys today and share your experiences.
Thank you for the opportunity.